Hello, this is Jeff Vandrew Jr.
And I'm Gary Leland, and you're listening to episode 90 of the Crypto Cousins podcast.
Feed your interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by joining Hall of Fame podcaster Gary Leland on the Crypto Cousins podcast. And remember, we are all cousins in the world of crypto. This week's price of Bitcoin.
$5,182. That's up $154.45, or 3% over the last 7 days. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Jeff, welcome to the Crypto Cousins podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me on the show. This is kind of a timely subject here, but I think this will probably go out a day or two after April 15th. But this is a really timely subject. I probably should have had you on like a month ago so people could take advantage of the information they're going to find out today more so.
Well, they'll get a big jump start on next year.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Hey, give us a short bio, just a minute or two about yourself, someone who may not be familiar with you.
Sure. So as you said, my name is Jeff Vandrew Jr. I'm involved in Bitcoin in a few different ways. First of all, I do develop some open source software. I'm a contributor to the BTC Pay project, BTC Pay server. I maintain the Python client library for BTC Pay, as well as the QuickBooks integration and the Patreon clone functionality. I do all that stuff. But my real day job, where I actually earn a living, is I offer a product called the Keykeeper IRA. And that is sort of makes use of my background as as being licensed as both an attorney and a CPA. And it's basically a way to invest retirement funds in Bitcoin on a tax-free basis while still being able to hold your own keys.
So basically, you are a financial advisor.
I am licensed as a financial advisor. I am licensed as a CFP. But between being an attorney, a CPA, and a software developer on the side, I'm busy enough that I don't actively practice financial planning. I don't tell you, hey, you should invest in these stocks or these bonds or these mutual funds or this amount of Bitcoin. I set up the legal structure for you that allows you to do it in the most tax-efficient way possible. So I guide you and hold your hand through that whole process. But ultimately, what you choose to invest in is up to you. I just help you to do it in the most secure, most tax-efficient way.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a question. This doesn't have to do with our interview, but everybody who does a podcast about cryptocurrency, including myself, somewhere during the show will say, I'll throw out a disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. What happens if they don't do that? I assume that there's a reason everybody's doing that. They just didn't all follow the leader. I did. So what is the scoop? Why do we all do that?
Well, when you're providing people financial advice, I mean, there's certain licensures that you should have depending on the scope of the advice you're providing, either from your state or from the Securities and Exchange Commission at the federal level. So you're giving people that disclaimer to say, hey, this isn't financial advice. I'm not an investment advisor. Otherwise, theoretically, let's say they took your advice, right? And they lost all their money, and then they find out that you're unregistered as a financial advisor. They could sue you saying, hey, like this guy held himself out as a financial advisor. He's not registered. I was injured. I have a legitimate injury. I need to be made whole on this. So that's why people do that. Even though I do have a CFP certification, I don't have an active registration with the SEC. So I even have to say, hey, like I'm not acting as your financial advisor in this capacity.
So if I give advice and they lose a lot of money and they're hurt and I am a financial advisor legally, then I can't be sued?
Well, it's not that you can't be sued at all. I mean, like any other professional, you're subject to malpractice, but it's a standard of, did you behave in a reasonable way? Did you take professional care? All that sort of stuff. Just like if this is the perfect example. If you give someone legal advice and you're not an attorney and it goes bad, you're going to get in trouble, right? But if you give someone legal advice and you are an attorney and they get in trouble, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't be sued. It's just a different standard, right? Did you meet the malpractice standard in terms of whether or not, and that's a much higher standard that a client would have to meet in order to sue you.
Okay, I've always wanted to ask someone that, but I've never thought about it when I've been talking to someone who would know the correct answer.
Yeah, no problem.
Exact answer. So I thought I'd go ahead that. But also, I want to let everybody know that Jeff is involved with BitBlock Boom this year, but this is not a paid episode. We'll talk about that later. This wasn't a paid episode. We had this scheduled up before, he got involved with BitBlock Boom. So I do want to throw that out there, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to talk about the options, the whole thing with you doing IRAs with Bitcoin and crypto. I find that pretty interesting. I was listening to some other podcasts you did last night, and the more I listened, the more interesting it actually was. What are checkbook IRAs? Let's start there. Why is that term, checkbook IRAs? And that's what we're talking about here, right?
Sure, exactly. So I'll very briefly kind of go through the evolution of an IRA, right? So, and that, because that'll answer your question there. So the way IRAs work, first of all, for those that are listening that aren't familiar with what an IRA is, I'll just very briefly say, an IRA is a tax-deferred account for saving for your retirement. So you can invest in stocks, bonds, whatever. We're going to be obviously talking about Bitcoin. And you do not have to pay any taxes on interest, on dividends, on capital gains. All that stuff within the IRA is tax-free. And there's broadly two types of them. There are traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. In the traditional IRA, you get a tax deduction for your contributions. But after you're retired, when you pull the money out, as you pull it out, you have to pay tax on it. With a Roth IRA, you don't get any tax deductions for contributions. But when you retire someday in the future, you do not have to pay any income tax when you pull it out.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask one of my questions here. I'm sorry to interrupt you because that was one of my questions. Because to me, as most of us believe in Bitcoin, it's going to be worth a ton of money someday.
Right.
And so it seems to be if you're going to – now I have some IRAs that are Roths and regular, but they haven't gone up like the potential of Bitcoin is going up. So it seems to me like – I know it depends on your tax situation, on everybody's tax situation, but it seems like to me if you're going, well, I'm just putting away my IRA because I got to do this every year because it's just stupid not to, that it'd be hard to beat the payback later on a Roth compared to a regular IRA if McAfee did happen to be right, and he didn't have to eat his private parts, you're sure going to wish that Bitcoin was a Roth IRA.
Yep. So I'll tell you what I see in that regard, because I've been setting these up for people for about 5 years now. For people that are just doing a fresh IRA off the bat or that have an existing Roth they want to roll over, they're typically doing Roths for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. I do a lot of traditionals still, because what I'll see a lot is people have a 401k from an old employer. You can roll a 401k from an old employer over into a traditional IRA tax-free. So most of the traditionals I set up are people that already have this big 401k at work. They want to allocate a portion of that to Bitcoin. You can do a conversion to a Roth, but they might not want to take that upfront tax hit. They just want it to be completely tax-free upfront. So they'll do a rollover into a traditional. But you're right. I mean, on the whole, if you're starting from scratch, you're starting from a small base, I think doing the Roth certainly makes sense. And I've even definitely had some people do some pretty large conversions from a 401k to a Roth IRA, which requires some upfront tax, but then it becomes tax-free in perpetuity. And just to jump back to that for a second, when you have a 401k from work, you can either roll at 100% tax-free into a traditional IRA, no tax upfront, nothing at all, or you can pay income tax upfront to roll it into a Roth IRA. And the upside to that is you don't have to pay income tax in the future when you pull it out.
How about if you have it with a private investment firm, not at work, you have IRAs with, let's say, Ameriprise or something like that? Same thing.
Yeah, same deal. I mean, traditional to traditional rollover would be tax exempt. A Roth to Roth rollover would be tax exempt, meaning no tax upfront. The only time you'd have any upfront tax is if you want to convert your existing traditional to a Roth. That's the only time that you'd have any upfront tax. Otherwise, it's completely tax-free upfront.
Okay, well, let me let you get back to your explanation. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to ask that while we were kind of covering those two. So
yeah, no, not a problem. So you had asked me, I believe, you had asked me about what a checkbook IRA was.
Right.
Okay. So with any IRA, the way it works under IRS rules is they're by their nature custodial accounts, meaning the assets have to be custodied by an entity that's either a bank or is specially licensed by the IRS as what's called a non-bank custodian, right? So your typical IRA, your normal IRA that you have with TD Ameritrade, or you have it with Ameriprise or Vanguard or whoever, right? Fidelity, there's a million, obviously, licensed custodians. You might be able to have control over the trades in that account. But if you look at your account statements, it won't say, Gary Leland on it, on your IRA. It'll actually say Ameriprise Trust Company, FBO, Gary Leland. FBO is for the benefit of. And that's an indicator that they're custodying the assets for you, even if they're giving you trading control. And to get the tax benefits of an IRA, that's legally required, right? So as a result of this requirement for custody, IRAs for a long time have been fairly restricted in terms of what you can invest in. Ameriprise, or, I'm using Ameriprise since you brought them up, but this would be the same for all traditional custodians. They don't want to mess around with, you investing in like real estate or stuff they have to keep track of. If they're custodying something for you, they want it to be something nice and clean and stuff that they're already holding and used to, which is basically stocks, bonds, mutual funds, right? That's why most IRAs, those are the investment choices. So that's your normal traditional IRA. Some years ago, not that long ago, when LLCs really started to become popular, which was like the early LLCs were invented. Well, they were invented in like the 80s, but most states didn't have them until the late 90s. And this, what I'm about to talk about, really kicked in the early 2000s. People realized that one of the ways you could get around some of these restrictions of the legal custody requirement was to create something called a checkbook IRA, because these were usually done using an LLC. What a checkbook IRA is you still have to have your custodian the way you would with any other IRA, because that's legally required. But instead of the custodian taking custody of all your investment, your custodian only has custody of one asset, which is a single member LLC owned entirely by the IRA. And what the LLC legal structure allows you to do is to appoint the ultimate account holder as manager of that LLC, meaning that even though they're not the owner of the LLC, because the custodian has to be the owner, as manager, they're the only ones with control over the LLC's fund. So what this allowed everyone to do was to have a structure that met the legal requirement of custody while still allowing the account holder to invest in whatever he wanted, because the only thing the custodian was required to keep track of was the fact that they owned the LLC. The manager of the LLC could then turn around and invest in non-traditional assets. In the beginning, the main asset this was used for was real estate. So if you wanted to buy like a rental property with your IRA, what would happen is you would roll your IRA into this checkbook IRA setup. And the reason, again, it's called a checkbook IRA is because as manager of the LLC, you have control over the checkbook that holds all the funds, unlike with a normal IRA where the custodian has that control. So you'd roll over your IRA to a special custodian that allowed checkbook IRAs. That custodian would literally just act as a pass-through. They would accept the rolled over funds. They would then just immediately cut a check out to that LLC. You're the manager of that LLC, so you'd be able to deposit those funds, and you'd be able to then take those funds and spend them on whatever you wanted. Again, the typical investment in the very beginning, early years, Bitcoin didn't exist yet, was real estate that these things were used for. Now, I should point out that just because it's a checkbook IRA doesn't mean that you're allowed to violate the prohibited transaction rules. These are a bunch of special rules the IRS puts out about certain types of investments that you cannot make within an IRA. But one of the good things is none of the prohibited transaction rules affect Bitcoin. So if you're investing in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency, you typically don't have to worry about those too much. So anyway, checkbook IRAs, like I said, they were initially invented primarily for real estate and some private lending stuff. And then, when Bitcoin came out and started to become popular, what I did is I took this existing checkbook IRA setup, and because I was personally very interested in Bitcoin, back in 2014, I applied it to Bitcoin. And at the time, I was the only person that I knew of that was doing this. So I applied it to Bitcoin originally just for myself. No one else back then was particularly interested in it. But I did start offering it to my clients. I am an attorney and a CPA, since it was a structure that I already come up with and there was no reason not to. And then, as you can imagine, in 2017, there started to become a lot more popular interest in it. And one of the real things that sets apart the structure that I set up from the typical, I should say, Bitcoin IRAs that you see advertised on the internet, is that it is a checkbook IRA rather than a custodial IRA. So a lot of these Bitcoin IRA companies are still custodial IRAs, meaning they hold all your private keys for you. Anytime you want to make a purchase or sale of Bitcoin, you have to do it through them, and they take a fee, sometimes as high as like 10% on your trade. And then they also charge an annual fee on the amount of Bitcoin that they're custodying for you. That's usually like 1%. With what I call a Keykeeper IRA, which is basically just taking the concept of a checkbook IRA and applying it to Bitcoin that I set up for you, you don't pay any of those fees and you hold all your own private keys. So I set up the whole legal structure for you with the custodian and the LLC. I help you get an account open on an exchange in the name of the LLC that you can use to buy and sell Bitcoin. But you don't even have to leave your Bitcoin on the exchange. Once you've made that purchase, you can transfer it to a hardware wallet. You can use Glacier protocol. You can use a multi-sig protocol. You're in complete control of the keys, so you can make it as secure as you want or do not want to make it. The advantage of that being, number one, again, there's all the normal advantages of being in control of your keys. As the saying goes, when you don't control your keys, it's not your Bitcoin. And just in addition to all those normal benefits of holding your own keys, you're not paying all those ongoing fees. There's no annual fee on a percentage of the Bitcoin that you own. There's no trading fee or anything like that on top. Obviously, if you're using an exchange, you're paying the exchange's fees, but there's no trading fees on top of that. You just pay a small flat annual fee to the custodian every year, which is currently $275 a year. And it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin or other alternative investments you have in there. You can use the same setup to do private. I do a lot of private lending in mine, so you can do stuff like that as well. So you pay a small nominal fee annually, and that's it. You're pretty much good to go. So you can think of this sort of setup as you do have to pay a setup fee, which is currently $1,900, but that's a one-time fee.
How much was that?
You have to pay that again.
How much was that again?
Once you pay that, you're really, long-term, you're saving a lot of money there.
How much was that setup fee again?
$1,900 is currently charged. That's an all-inclusive fee that you won't pay anything else in year one at all. So that includes your year one annual fee. It includes everything. You don't start paying that annual fee in the year two, which as I said, is currently just $275.
So that was one of my questions. You do get to put the money like in your treasure wallet or wherever you want to.
Exactly. Yep. Any kind of storage that you can come up with, anything from the least secure paper wallet you have pinned on your refrigerator to a multi-sig setup with Glacier to a hardware wallet. Anything you come up with, you can use. If you want to use something like, and I have no financial relationship with these companies, I'm just mentioning them as examples. If you want to use something like Unchained Capital's multi-sig, you can use that too. However you want to do it, that's entirely up to you. You're fully in control.
Well, that was one of my concerns, so I'm glad to hear that. That's pretty exciting. So how popular are these? I mean, are they becoming more and more popular as Bitcoin, I assume, becomes more and more well-known?
Yeah, exactly. So in 2014, I would do one or two of these a year, right? This was not a common thing. Other than my own, it wasn't all that popular. It took off like a rocket ship in 2017. And even though we're in a bear market now, I still do a really good number of these. Because it's a bear market, it makes sense to buy in now, right? Obviously, while the price is low and you remove all that future appreciation from tax, right? So that's number one. And then another thing that I've really been doing for a lot of people, I have some clients who have their existing Bitcoin IRA with one of the custodial type companies, and they'll if you have one of those, you can do a rollover into the Keykeeper IRA that I set up for you. And by doing that, in addition to holding your own keys, you're saving yourself a lot of annual fees going forward. And now is a good time to do that before the price goes up, right? Because a lot of those custodial IRAs, the annual fee you pay depends on the value in the account. So if your value is down a little bit right now, now's a good time to roll out of one of those custodial IRAs. I've also had some clients do rollovers out of Grayscale. So they have a 401k at work or an IRA that's invested in Grayscale, which for those people that aren't familiar, Grayscale is a fund that holds Bitcoin on your behalf. Sort of it's not legally a mutual fund, but you can sort of think of it that way. It's only open to accredited investors. The downside to holding your Bitcoin through Grayscale is, I mean, they perform the service like any other. The only downside to it is it trades at a premium to the actual price of Bitcoin. There are underlying fees to it. And again, you don't hold your own keys. So recently I've had a couple people who had 401ks or IRAs that were invested in Grayscale do a rollover out of that 401k or IRA into the Keykeeper IRA where they can hold their own keys and get out of paying those fees.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, a hypothetical question here to make sure that I understand, because I'm asking from the point of a guy who is an entrepreneur, not that works for someone else. So that's why I'm talking about IRAs, I guess. Let's say hypothetically I have $50,000 in Roth IRAs sitting with an investment company like Ameriprise or whatever.
Yep.
And I have those sitting there and I want to roll those over into a Bitcoin IRA. First of all, do I have them send me the money so I can buy the Bitcoin? Or does the money get transferred to you and you buy the Bitcoin and send me the Bitcoin to put in my wallet? Who buys the Bitcoin?
So mechanically, here's how it works. The first thing I do for you is I set up a custodial account with an IRS licensed custodian for you. We typically use Sun West Trust for this purpose. That's just who we work with. As a lawyer, I can't act as your custodian. There's certain rules about that. But all the fees I just mentioned are all wrapped into that. So there's no additional fee for that.
So that would run $1,900 approximately, no matter how much I sent you.
Exactly. Okay. Right. The first thing we do is we just set up an empty custodial account with an IRS licensed custodian. And then I form an LLC for you that is wholly owned by that custodial account. And then once we have all that set up, and I help you with this through the whole process, we complete what's called a rollover request. And basically what we do is we give the custodian the account number and custodian name of your existing IRA. And then they arrange for the transfer amongst themselves. You don't have to worry about it. Basically, you mentioned Ameriprise before. Let's say you had your IRA at Ameriprise. Ameriprise will just wire the funds directly over to the new custodian. As soon as the custodian receives those funds, what they do is they cut a check out made out to the LLC that I set up for you, and they mail that to you. Once you get that check, you deposit it in a checking account. One of the things I help you do is set up a checking account in the name of that LLC. And then once those funds are in the checking account, you can transfer them over to an exchange. You'll have an exchange account. Again, I help you get this set up. And then you can buy your Bitcoin. Once you bought your Bitcoin on the exchange, you can also, by the way, if you don't want to use an exchange, you can use local Bitcoins or whatever. Once you bought your Bitcoin on the exchange, you can then transfer it into a hardware wallet or however you want to handle it. You just need to keep it in a wallet separate from your other Bitcoin. So you want to keep your IRA Bitcoin totally separate from your other Bitcoin.
I guess you're not going to be trading and dealing with that, so you can just put that in a safety deposit box or something.
Right. However you feel comfortable storing it would be completely fine. And if you do want to actively trade, it's not what I do, but you can do that. And the advantage to that is there's no gains on, you don't have to pay any tax on any trading gains.
Oh, so I can, if I see potential to do something, I can do it and take advantage of it and still have it in my IRA.
Absolutely. And if you become too, let's say you feel that you're too Bitcoin heavy, like Bitcoin is too large of a proportion of your net worth, you can sell it to cash and that's completely fine. You know, you can then take that cash, move it into more traditional investments like stocks, bonds, IRAs. That's all tax-free. Obviously, most people listening are probably long-term holders, but it's not necessarily stuck, for lack of a better term, in Bitcoin. You can do all different sorts of stuff with that. And you can even, I should say, use this setup for other types of alternative investments. Like I do a lot of like private lending through Yield Street, for instance. You can do things like that. So you're not just restricted to Bitcoin. So it's very open-ended. One other thing I just wanted to mention briefly, because you mentioned being an entrepreneur. If you're self-employed and none of your employees work more than 1,000 hours a year, you can actually set this up as a self-directed 401k rather than a self-directed IRA, which is extremely similar to everything I just mentioned, except the annual fee is a little bit lower. You have the advantage of not having to deal with the LLC in the middle. Self-directed 401ks are allowed to be self-trustee. They don't need a licensed custodian. So it's a little bit more of a simpler legal structure that also has slightly lower fees. But that's only available to people who, again, own their own business and don't have any employees that other than themselves that work over 1,000 hours a year.
Well, let's say next year comes and I want to give you more money. Do I pay just the $250 for the year, or I pay that $1,900 again?
Nope. That one-time fee is a one-time fee. You can make as many contributions as you want down the line. Doesn't matter. All you have to pay is the annual fee.
Okay. And once I start with it, though, I pay the $250 every year.
Yeah, it's $275.
$275.
Yeah. You pay that every year until you close the account someday.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Yep. But that's the only right. Typically, the only ongoing fee is the $275 a year.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of food to chew on there. I need to think about doing this with some of mine because I'm a believer in Bitcoin. So why do I have it sitting in fiat? Maybe. So I need to do that. But before we do, I need to break away for a minute and let everybody know about BitBlock, which I call the Real Bitcoin Conference that's coming to Dallas, Texas. And I call it the Real Bitcoin Conference because it seems like all the Bitcoin conferences I've gone to in the last year hardly spoke about Bitcoin. They spoke about every coin there was except Bitcoin, one of them. But this will be our second year for the BitBlock Conference in Dallas. It's scheduled for the 17th and 18th. We have a ton of great speakers. And if you're interested in coming, take a look at the website at bitblockboom.com and use the discount code COUSINS, COUSINS, at checkout, and you'll receive 30% off the price of your ticket. It was a great event last year. It'll be a great event this year. And you were there last year, Jeff, and this year you are the coffee sponsor, which I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was a great event last year, don't you think, for our first year?
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this. Of all the conferences I go to, I enjoy BitBlock Boom the most because it's the most Bitcoin-centered and always has the group of attendees that I enjoy the most. So I'm really looking forward to it this year. As you mentioned, I am doing the coffee sponsorship this year, which is ironic because I'm not a coffee drinker myself.
Well, I'll spend a lot of time there for you. I am.
Yeah. And then also the day before, or actually 2 days before, on the Thursday, I'm hosting the Bitcoin and Barbells meetup nearby there in Dallas.
Tell us about that. That was on my list here. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no problem. So as I have my fingers in a lot of different things, in addition to, being involved developing some open source software and being an attorney and a CPA and offering my clients Bitcoin IRAs. I am a competitive bodybuilder. And one thing that I noticed, especially when I was at BitBlock Boom last year, is there are a lot of Bitcoiners that are trying to get stronger, trying to put on some size and strength. And I got a lot of questions about that just from random attendees last year. So one of the ideas I had this year was, well, I'll put together a meetup. We'll get together. We'll have a lifting session. I'll kind of provide some coaching and about, some different strength movements as well as nutrition and diet, things of that nature. And, we'll have a good time. We'll grab some dinner afterwards and it'll be fun. So I'm doing that the Thursday before BitBlock Boom. It's going to be somewhere near the conference venue. I don't have a venue booked yet because I don't know how many attendees we'll ultimately have. We've already got 13 signups. So if you're interested, definitely sign up now because I'm going to have to cap that fairly soon because, obviously this is not the kind of thing where I can have 50 people.
Where do they go to sign up?
Well, there is an Eventbrite link on my Twitter, or I don't know if you're able to put it in the show notes after we're finished recording.
I'll add it to the website even for BitBlock Boom. How's that?
That would be fantastic.
Under the schedule page. I'll put it under Thursday and schedule.
And I will, after we wrap up recording here, I'll email you the Eventbrite link. Tickets are $5, so it's not an expensive event or anything like that. So, yeah, hopefully some of our listeners will show up and I'll get to meet some people.
That sounds great. Yeah, I might even stop by there. Hey, I got another question for you. This is I'm not looking for legal advice. I'm looking for, is there something I need to be aware of? I had a lot of people when Bitcoin was going crazy, hitting 19,000 in 2017, that were wanting me to come over because they knew I was into Bitcoin. A lot of people my age know nothing about computers, and doing stuff like that. And they don't want to learn, but they have lots of money. And they were wanting me to come over and help them buy Bitcoin. And some were going, Gary, if I just send you a check for so much money, will you just buy me some? I said, no, I can't do that. I'm not buying you Bitcoin and holding it for you. I'm not the bank. So I came up with an idea, and I'm wondering if this is a feasible idea or is there's some technical licensing you think I need. I thought this time when it goes parabolic and people start hitting me up again, maybe I would start something where I would come over to their computer, run like an antivirus on it to make sure their computer is somewhat clean, help them set up a wallet, help them set up an account on a couple of different exchanges so they have a few to choose from, and then help them through the whole process for a fee. Would that be something you need licensing for, you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting angle to take, because your idea there is somewhat unique from what I would hear about. But I got a lot of questions in this ballpark back in 2017 for a lot of the exact reasons that you gave. What a lot of people wanted to do, which is not a good idea without proper licensure, it was like, oh, what I'll do is I'll just set up an LLC, and then I'll accept investments from all these people that don't know how to deal with Bitcoin. And then I'll just go and then buy Bitcoin. And the problem with that is you're essentially running an unlicensed hedge fund by doing that.
Yeah, I don't want any part of that.
Right, exactly, right. And I know that's not what you're proposing. And if you're accepting money from other people, oh, let me write you a check and buy me some Bitcoin, you're probably acting as the money transmitter, which also requires licensing, which I do very astutely.
It's a good thing I said no to that then, because I got offered that 3 or 4 times. People were like, it's one guy even said, hey, can I send you $100,000? You just buy my Bitcoin. I was like, no, I know something's wrong here.
Yeah, right. You were right in that it didn't pass the smell test. And that would generally require being licensed as a money transmitter. Your proposal is different, right? Because you're really just providing people tech consulting.
Right. I'm coming over and I'm even going, okay, I'm turning my head, enter your password here and do all your stuff. Tell me when you're through. I'm just walking them through it, spending a day over there.
So before I give my answer, I'm going to lead off by saying you can't rely on this as legal advice.
Right.
Listening, because you're not my client, right?
I wanted to make sure there wasn't something that was so obvious that you go, are you an idiot, Gary? That's what I was looking for.
So with that disclaimer aside, that anybody out there has to consult with their own attorney. What you're doing is likely fine. I would have the client sign an engagement letter that says, I'm providing you tech consulting. I'm not telling you how much Bitcoin to buy or providing you any financial advice, and I'm not handling any of your money for you. But I would do that just to be safe. But outside, assuming that you had them sign something like that, an engagement, or even if they didn't sign it, but they clicked on something when they signed up for it on the website, accepting those terms, like a terms of service type thing, you should be fine. Because in that event, you're not custodying any money for them. You're not transmitting any money, nor are you providing any investment advice. You're just providing some technical advice on how to properly use the necessary technology to make the purchase.
I just foresee that when this goes parabolic next time, there are going to be some people who have a lot of money who want to do this, but they're going to be like my sister who tried to do it in 2017 and she couldn't even get her Coinbase account built. There are a lot of people, Jeff, let's face it, that have more money than they know what to do with. And it's just a matter of knowing those people or knowing people who know those people. And they certainly don't want to do this wrong or, mess it up or, put their money in a wallet and lose their. I'm still, when I'm transferring money, big money to my wallet, I'm going, oh, I hope I did this right. And I've been doing it for years now.
Even though it's completely illogical to feel that way, when you send a transaction into the mempool, like a big transaction, I still feel a little weird about it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions real quick before we get out of here. What is your thoughts about 2019? Just your personal thoughts about what we're going to see happening this year.
I think we're just going to see more and more iteration on the Lightning Network, because that's where all the real innovation is happening right now, which is a good thing, right? Because we don't want a rapidly iterating base layer. That would be a bad thing. One of the nice things about Bitcoin is it kind of got a best of both worlds situation where we have this very, very stable base layer where, of course, things do improve, but it's just stable, conservative, slow moving. And then we have this second layer where things can iterate very, very rapidly. Specifically, I think on Lightning, where you're going to see a lot of consumer-oriented products go is towards gaming. Because right now, you don't, quote-unquote, need Lightning to transact on an everyday basis, right? On-chain fees are low enough, and right now, Bitcoin is still mostly being held rather than spent in everyday transactions. But obviously, it's still a good idea to build out Lightning now, so when that change happens, when on-chain fees go up, and Bitcoin is more used in everyday transactions, we want to have the infrastructure there and ready to go. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that to happen, I think it's going to be very, very niche things where you're going to see Lightning being used, gaming being one possibility. And I'm not a gamer, but gaming, you want to have those instant payments within the course of the game. You want to be able, a lot of times, for them to be very, very small payments, and you don't want to have to deal with exchange rates or stuff like that if you're setting up like some sort of a worldwide gaming server. So Bitcoin transactions over Lightning really seem to be the perfect fit for that.
I have to agree. Lightning is going to be a major deal. I've got my Casa node. I think I'm going to set it up today and start messing around with that myself. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book, I'm going to give two favorite books, one Bitcoin related and one not. I know I'm violating the question, but I'm going to do it anyway.
That's okay. We're pretty loose here.
My favorite Bitcoin related book is Saifedean's The Bitcoin Standard. I just think it's by far the best book to give to someone so that they'll understand why Bitcoin is important.
I agree 100%.
Because a lot of people don't really get it because they just think of it as a new Visa or MasterCard or something like that. And the Bitcoin Standard really gets across why that's not why it's important. You know, it's really this concept of sound money is why it's important.
And especially the sound money, how he explains money. That's the most important part.
Yeah, and it was such a cool, creative decision to not even mention Bitcoin until several chapters into the book, right? In other words, people sold on sound money first and then explain why Bitcoin is the soundest money. That was a really creative decision, I thought, and really unique. And then my favorite non-Bitcoin book, I guess, is probably, it's almost trite at this point because so many people like the book, but Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile. I'm definitely a big fan of that book.
Okay, I haven't read that, so I'll have to put that on my list. Your favorite quote?
I thought about this one, and I don't tend to think in quotes, but there is one that always has kind of stuck out to me a little bit. It's from a very old book called As a Man Thinketh, which is sort of like right now you see on like Twitter, there's all these like mindset personalities, right? Guys out there that want to teach you how to have a better mindset.
Right.
I suppose with varying levels of utility, right? I'm sure some are good, some are bad. As a Man Thinketh was sort of that kind of thing written like over 100 years ago. And one of the quotes from that book is, "The truth is that an oppressor and a slave are co-operators in ignorance, and while seeming to afflict each other, are in reality afflicting themselves."
That's a pretty interesting quote.
Yeah.
What's your favorite crypto resource?
Well, I guess the Bitcoin Standard, honestly, for getting new people involved. If you're looking for more technical stuff.
That is a good resource. I don't think of that as a resource, but it is. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking for more technical stuff in terms of resources to really dig into the tech side, I guess I'll give two. If you have at least a slight background in programming, you might not be an actual developer, but you understand the general ideas of how code works. Maybe you did the introductory solo learn class on Python. I think Jimmy Song's book is a really good book, even if you don't understand every single chapter. I think you'll get a really good idea of how Bitcoin transactions, the actual structure of a transaction, how the scripting language works, how transactions get onto the blockchain, all that sort of stuff. I think that's a great resource. And if you really want to dig in and be able to potentially write software that will interact with Bitcoin on some level, I highly recommend Justin Moon's Biddle Bootcamp course. I actually took that course. I was in the first cohort, and it was a really great course. I really enjoyed it. Justin's great and gives his students a lot of attention. So I highly recommend that as well. Even if you're not an experienced programmer necessarily, but that's something that you think you might want to get into, that course probably is worth checking out. And if you have questions about it, I would just DM Justin on Twitter. He's really receptive to that sort of thing.
And he'll be speaking at BitBlock Boom too. So people
Absolutely. So I wasn't even thinking about that. I was plugging BitBlock Boom without even trying.
Well, I'm not going to miss that opportunity, dude. Hey, first of all, go to find out about the IRAs and everything, all the information we talked about in the first half of the show.
Yep, you can get all kinds of information about that, as well as get started by going to my website, which is vandrew.com. That's V as in Victor, A, N as in Nancy, D as in David, REW.com. It's just my last name.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Vandrew, ATTY CPA. And then I'm not going to read the Eventbrite link for Bitcoin and Barbell since it's so long, but we'll get that posted.
Yeah, like I said, that'll be on the schedule. We'll put that down as a Thursday event on the schedule. Kind of make it more official there.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks for joining. And where can they follow you personally?
Just Twitter @Andrew ATTYCPA.
Okay, very good. I might come up for consensus. Marty said you live in New York, in the area there, right?
I live in New Jersey, yes.
Okay.
So it's the funny part is to people in Texas, it's like there's like no distinction there. And I'm not busted on you. That's like normal in most of the country. To people in New York, it's like a huge distinction. Like the fact that I live in New Jersey, I may as well live in China. But yes.
How far is that from New York?
It's not too far. It's about an hour. I'm in New York all the time.
So I drove three and a half hours this weekend to go to another part of Texas.
Yeah, exactly. So, the nice part about being here in Jersey and being near New York is I get to go to BitDevs, which is a fantastic meetup that's in New York every month. I get to go to like Pierre Rochard's meetup every month. There's a lot of really great Bitcoin stuff going on in New York that I get to go to, all while being here in New Jersey on the shore. As I look out my window at the beach, I kind of get the best of both worlds. I don't have to live in New York, but I get to live nearby enough that I get to experience all that stuff.
Well, I think consensus is going to be like South by Southwest in the fact that I don't have to go spend $1,500 on a South by Southwest ticket to do something every day because there's so much stuff going on surrounding it. And I think that's the way consensus is going to be. And Marty said he would make sure I was on the invite list to everything. So I may email you before I come to get some more stuff added to my schedule if I do make it up there.
Absolutely, man. I'm always happy to help out with that stuff. And while you're in town here, I definitely look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you. And thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. I appreciate you having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. A big thank you to all the cousins out there that are showing their support by donating, subscribing, and leaving great reviews on iTunes. All of those things help more than you realize. Now, you can subscribe almost anywhere podcasts are available by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. Call me with your comments or questions at 747-777-9471, or you can email me at TheCryptoCousins@gmail.com, and I'll try to use these on future episodes. Please take a peek at the 4-Minute Crypto Show, which is produced every weekday and located at 4minutecrypto.com. It's the place to get your daily dose of crypto news, and it's always 4 minutes or less. And one last thing, please take a look at my new website, Crypto Crybaby. This website is for the true crypto fan and sells Bitcoin and crypto gear like t-shirts, caps, and so much more. Take a look at CryptoCrybaby.com today. Thanks again for listening. Love you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Crypto Cousins podcast. Please share the show with your friends. They can subscribe by going to CryptoCousins.com/subscribe. And if you want to know more about Gary, just go to GaryLeland.com. Make sure and join Gary and all the Crypto Cousins every week for a new episode of the Crypto Cousins podcast. The Crypto Cousins podcast and the information included in the podcast are not intended as investment advice. Investing in any cryptocurrency is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Always seek professional advice before investing in any cryptocurrency. Please understand, you are using any and all information from the Crypto Cousins at your own risk.